doctors. I'm one of them, right? As though I'm the authority in your life. No, I'm giving you the power back. Understand your energy systems. Understand what you're taking in. Become aware. Choose again. Choose again. The next day, choose again. And after that, choose again. What's stopping you? We are creative beings, and we have the intellectual capacity to question and make those choices. So become awake. And that is really a joyful way to live, you know? You're stepping into your light. I am Matt. I am Nisha. And you're going to choose. And I choose a spiritual life. That is what drives me. This is my good fortune, I think, in this life. To bridge that science and to bridge the spiritual way, because they're actually complementary. They're complementary ways of living. Just think of it. When you do a scientific experiment, we have a protocol. We do this, we add this to the flask, and then we expect a certain outcome. Then we measure the temperature, we weigh it, and we look at the color. We do all of those things. I give you 2 Tylenol and then call me in the morning. We know that's a scientific experiment. But look at the spiritual. It's the same thing. You're going to do meditation. You're going to have certain things happen to you. And when you have a guru, they'll ask you, has this happened to you? Has something unlocked in you? Okay, that's just the same. You have a protocol. And in Buddhism, it's called the Lam Rim pathway, the enlightened pathway. You reach a certain point, your guru will ask you, are you ready for the next step and the next step and the next step? So the spiritual way and the scientific way, they're the same. All right, let's stop separating the two. This is again, kindergarten thinking. We got to use them both. That means when I get into my car, I tie the seatbelt. I take my vitamin D. I don't deny those things, but ultimately Nisha is in charge. My consciousness, my intention is operating all the time. Is that the mystical experience you were talking about?
Yeah, well, that's amazing because it's interesting. It lines up to an experience that I wrote about in my book, Zen Athlete, about this man that I knew, Tyrone. And the experiences that I had line up with that as well, where it's an experience where like you are home. And he said the same thing to me. He goes, when I was in that state, I couldn't function. I had to, he's like, I watched life take care of me, but you can't stay in that state. Because I asked him, like, why did you, a bunch of questions about it. He's like, you can't stay there. He's like, but he also said, you want to be human. You want to have this experience. This is a very, very special experience that we're all having. And that state you can't stay in, but it's good to know that it exists. And the thing I was curious about, because of the place you were in, you had this experience through these relics that you had. And then also other people experienced it when you brought them home and you had that opportunity. Well, what I've been researching and I talked to you a little bit about is this idea of Tartaria, which essentially there's many ways we could go about it, but we look at the pyramids and we think, holy smokes, who built those pyramids? If you know anything about the pyramids and you've looked at them, you know that nobody knows for sure that they're all creating theories. Well, we look at these old churches, and one time we had a correspondence, you said, Matt, there's these places in Quebec that have these churches, because I was going to go to them, that might create that same experience. Well, when we look at these cathedrals, we've been conditioned to think that these cathedrals are old and, from the Stone Ages. And they have a
very sophisticated cathedral, cathode, electric.
Exactly. And so when we look at cymatics, and which is a visual representation of sound, those windows match it. And they also have these massive organs and they have these massive bells. And so it's possible and maybe even probable that they use sound and frequency that emanated through the whole town to put people into a state of bliss, into connection. In the same way you go into a room that has very scary music, very scary photos on the wall, you're going to feel terrified, but you go in this big, vast, open space that's using sound, geometry, physics, all in this way to create an experience, just like a symphony or something else. And the last point I'll make of this, I remember when I was in Nepal studying with the Buddhist monks, they were doing meditation. I could hear them oming. And I asked the person I was having conversation with if I could go and see what was going on. And when I entered the room, and I it's hard to estimate how many people were there. I would say anywhere between 50 and 100. You know, it was a pretty open space, and they were all oming. As I went into that room, my body with each one would kind of disintegrate into particles. I wasn't like a particle being, but it felt like my body was like the particles. And then as the ohm would finish, it would kind of come back into solid matter. And then the ohm would come and I would release into particles. And then I go back into the solid matter, and was thinking, oh my goodness, like this is incredible. And this, I think, is this connection between science and physics and consciousness, because there are tools that really help us accelerate that opportunity to have that experience. And then it's the responsibility. It's not so much to have the experience. It's like, okay, now that you've had it, how do you walk the path? How do you now, with that understanding, take it forward, share it, and then deal with all the challenges and the muddiness and the craziness that can go out in the world, kind of like in Zen when they talk about, reaching enlightenment, but then you got to chop wood and carry water. And
the outer conditions will be there. But here's the thing. That's the whole thing. There are 10,000 pathways home to the heart. Okay, it can be Om. And by the way, that Om is very powerful. Out of the unmanifest comes the manifest. And it is the word of God.